I can get you more credits.
I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold.
Disney The Mandalorian revitalized the Star Wars franchise in a way no one could have expected. But by the final episodes of Season 1, I couldn't help to feel that not much was progressing in terms of plot. Episode 1 sets up the exposition and the world of the Mandalorian, and ends with meeting the child. In Episode 3, Mando decides to keep the child, and his quest to return him to a safe haven begins. And then his ship breaks down. He lends a helping hand to new friends, says his farewells, and continues his quest. And he does it all over again. Helps friends, resumes quest. Most of the runtimes of Episode 4, 5, and 6 follow this formula and feel like they could have happened in any order. It's not until the end of Episode 7 out of 8 in the season that Mando finally makes some progress to his quest that he started all the way back in Episode 3.
You may think you have some idea of what you are in possession of, but you do not.
And I wasn't the only one feeling this way. IndieWire's Tyler writes in his review that there has been zero plot developments to speak of since the titular protagonist escaped the Bounty Hunters Guild with Baby Yoda in tow in Episode 3, and that The Mandalorian is a $100 million show about nothing. But considering the show's critical acclaim, maybe that's the point. Maybe there's success to be found in a show about nothing.
We tell them we got an idea for a show about nothing.
Exactly.
They say, what's your show about? I say nothing.
There you go.
The notorious and arguably most successful show about nothing, Seinfeld. Showrunner Larry David's infamous rule of no hugging, no learning launched the show into its own category. In a time where other sitcoms were larger than life
I'm pregnant.
and try to teach you right from wrong.
His life goes on. He's not supposed to be here for you. You're supposed to be here for him.
This nothing was actually the show deciding to scale down their focus on everyday life. The subject matter of any given Seinfeld episode is relatively nothing when compared to other sitcoms.
Twist off.
Much like comparing the characters of The Mandalorian to larger Star Wars stories. So today, let's explore how Seinfeld's close observations of everyday life parallels with The Mandalorian, quite possibly the next biggest show about nothing. In the 90s, Seinfeld broke away from previous sitcoms by highlighting mundane behaviors of everyday life.
It was the thing that we always were drawn to, were these gaps in society where there was no rules. How do you find this out? How do you ask this? What does this mean? There's no indication.
Seinfeld offered rules in these parts of society that had none. Like in the very first episode of the show, Seinfeld and George argue about what it meant that a female friend wanted to crash at his place overnight, and what all the signals actually meant.
Listen. Don't get worked up, because you're gonna know the whole story the minute she steps off the plane.
Really? How?
Because it's all in the greeting.
Uh-huh.
Seinfeld constantly explored situations where there were no rules. It's this same lawlessness that is the backdrop in The Mandalorian.
Traditional Westerns take place in that era between right on the edge of chaos and civilization, or decentralized power and centralized power.
This Wild West setting represents the Mandalorian's breakaway from its own past. It breaks away from the 40-year-old space opera so many before it cling onto. For showrunner Jon Favreau, the Wild West was the perfect playground to test out new rules and stories.
So in Star Wars, that gave us a lot of inspiration for the types of stories we could tell.
With no rules and grand narrative to follow, the show has the freedom to tell its own unique story set in the Star Wars universe. The Mandalorian highlights life post-galactic war. Seinfeld's breakaway from mainstream ideas of a sitcom granted them the creative freedom to explore more taboo ideas. Everything from homosexuality, mental abuse,
We're not gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
to sex and masturbation.
I'm out.
They all became household catchphrases. Similarly, The Mandalorian gains the creative freedom to explore the lives of non-chosen characters. Characters that are not bound to the beats of an epic space opera found on the big screen. Characters like Anakin, Luke, and Rey were chosen ones to bring back balance to the universe. They were destined for love and success on the galactic battleground, but not the characters in The Mandalorian. Characters like the bounty hunter IG-11 were only found in the background, but now the star of the show.
I am IG-11. I am this child's nurse droid, and require that you remind him to me immediately.
Episode 4 is the perfect example where forgotten characters and their day-to-day lives are the stars of the show. The episode begins on a no-name krill farm under siege. Mando and the child decide to lay low in this part of the planet, soon after meeting former rebel shock trooper Cara Dune.
You want some soup?
Much like Mando, Cara is not a chosen one. She's ex-military trying to find her way post-Empire. The show decides to shed light on the relatively background noise of the krill farmers and Cara.
There is something with satire or with storytelling where you take the most mundane and elevate it.
Sorgan. Looks like there's no starport, no industrial centers, no backwater scuggle, which means it's perfect for us.
Cara and Mando eventually team up to help the village fight back, the big threat being a lonely AT-ST Imperial Walker. Instead of going up against an Imperial fleet, it is a rusting AT-ST that is the focus.
And if you're taking something that's really elevated, bring it down to the grid of at least intimidating pieces of mech in the originals that we upgraded to the big bad in our Seven Samurai episode.
The Mandalorian is able to take a single AT-ST and make it the star of the ensuing battle, showing that even a scaled down Star Wars action set piece can be just as entertaining. In episode 4, a nothing farm teaming up with an ex-shock trooper is the focus of the show. On paper, these scenes are relatively nothing in comparison to the larger narratives of a Luke Skywalker, but in The Mandalorian, this scaled down focus works. Seinfeld's scaled-down show about nothing structure parallels The Mandalorian's success in exploring lesser-known Star Wars stories and settings. Both shows break away from their respective past and convention.
Well, I live by my rules. I don't live by your rules.
This gave them the creative freedom to explore human behaviors that go unnoticed and forgotten characters. Both shows found success in shining the spotlight on their own respective nothing. So what do you think? Did you feel like The Mandalorian was going nowhere? If you like this type of content, be sure to like, share, and subscribe.